well as Mary's life
Oh,
and
yeah.
all
Yes,
this
that's
kind
right.
of thing, because it's, it affects the family, doesn't it? Just not
It's
just
a
the
family
person.
disease. That's right.
Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely. Well, you know that.
Okay, yeah. Right. I'd like to introduce Brian from England, and Brian's wife Mary has MS. Welcome, Brian.
Hello, hello.
Hello. Right. We'd like to hear your story of what it's like living with somebody who's got MS, alongside of Mary's story as well.
Okay.
When was Mary diagnosed with MS?
Well, she was misdiagnosed in 1962 as epilepsy. In those days, they didn't have MRI scans or anything like that. And we were in South Africa, and she had all sorts of tests, and they decided she had epilepsy. But she was finally diagnosed with MS in 1967. We'd come back to England by then.
Right.
And later than that, after that, some time after that, a doctor down here where we live in Dorset said no, he didn't think it was epilepsy at all. He thought it was MS, and he was proved to be right.
Mm-hmm. So,
And,
how did that impact on Mary's life at the time? Was she a very active person before?
Oh, Mary is very active. She was always. I mean, we were living in Cape Town when this all happened, and
Right.
she used to go swimming just about every day, and we'd go out and do all sorts of things. They had a wonderful time.
Mm-hmm.
And we decided that when we found it was MS, Mary dropped one of our daughters on the stairs going upstairs.
Oh, dear.
And we decided that it was a bit serious, and we went and saw a doctor, and they passed it on to a specialist, and he diagnosed it as MS at that stage.
Mm-hmm.
But we decided the best thing is to try and ignore it. I mean, you can't, can you? But
Yes.
just go on as naturally as possible and hope that we could have a good life. And I think that helped, because I think if you do that, you have a kind of positive outlook on life.
Mm-hmm.
And we did. And I mean, Mary was still positive right up until recently. Mary was very positive.
What were her? Sorry, Brian.
Go on.
What were Mary's symptoms initially when she was first?
Oh, in South
diagnosed?
Africa, she had 5 fits, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and after the fifth one, it seemed to be under control. But when we got back to England, before she was diagnosed with MS, her foot started drooping when she was walking up the road. And that's when she tripped up the stairs with our daughter and cracked her head on the stairs, which was a bit sad.
Did she have any other symptoms? That
Well,
people with MS can get.
A bit of a problem with her eyes, but that was a minor problem. It was her foot that started us off.
Uh-huh.
You know.
Okay.
And tiredness, of course, was really a major symptom.
Were her bowel and bladder okay?
At that stage, yes. Later in life, they both went downhill fast.
Right.
But no, she was fine right up until, 1984. She suddenly couldn't walk anymore. She was able to walk with a bit of help, and then in 1984, she suddenly lost the ability to walk, and that was a big change in our life. But even then, she carried on. We carried on doing things. She took a very positive outlook on life, which is great.
So, how did it impact on the family? You said about dropping your daughter. How old was she at the time?
Well, they were all right when they were younger. But luckily for us, I suppose luckily, it's a silly word to use, but luckily for us, Mary got worse very slowly. And our daughters, in fact, she went into a wheelchair when our last daughter had just left home. Our second daughter had just left home. But she... I just lost my track there. But my second daughter just left home. That's when she went into the wheelchair, and she fought against that as well. And the children, one time they came, one was going up to the high school. First day back from high school, and I rang from work to find out how things had gone. And my youngest daughter said, "Oh, Daddy, there's a panic. I'll ring back." So I said, "No, I'll ring you back in 5 minutes. Tell me what happened." Apparently Mary had fallen, and she couldn't get up, so she sort of dragged herself across the floor, switched the television on, and dragged herself back and watched television until the kids came home. And the eldest one, being a little bit more grown up, said, "Go make a cup of tea." And the youngest daughter said, "What do you mean make a cup of tea?" But anyway, she made a cup of tea, and when I rang back, everything was all sweetness and light, and they were all happy. But it did affect their lives quite greatly. Well, mine, of course, I never got to do all the things I want to do at work, because I decided that family life is more important, and I ended up working from home, selling chocolates, as it turned out, on the internet. And it did enable me to carry on looking after Mary and work from home, so it was quite good. But it did stop me progressing. And the girls certainly, it affected their lives. It didn't stop them doing things, thank goodness, but it affected their life, of course.
So, how did Mary find LDN?
Well, friends of ours, a couple of friends of ours, they came to see us one day, and Janet was very, very ill. It wasn't. I think we just got to go home, David. Sorry. So they went home, and we went to see them about 6 weeks later. And Janet was whizzing around in a wheelchair. We thought, well, this is a bit, what's this? So we said, what happened? And she told us about LDN. And Mary said, I want some of that. So I said, well, hang on. I think we talked to our doctor first. We did actually talk to our doctor, and he was not very keen. He sort of said, oh, I don't know, Brian. And I said, well, I'm not actually asking. I'm telling you we want it. And he laughed. Luckily, we have a good relationship with our doctor. He laughed, and he spoke to a couple of his colleagues. And one of them said, oh, no, I wouldn't. And the other one said, well, she's got nothing to lose, has she? So he said, all right, I'll give you a prescription, private prescription, but, do let me know how it gets on. And when he saw Mary a couple of months later, he said, it's worked, hasn't it, Mary? And he said, yeah, it has. Great.
And what had it done to help at that stage?
Well, at that stage, she couldn't hold a mug in her hand. Her last limb was going. Carers coming in had to hold her hand up so she could drink. And now she can hold a mug. She's got worse in lots of other ways, but as far as that element of the problem has gone, she now can hold a mug so she can drink on her own, and it gives her that last element of independence.
Yes.
And it's just as well, because not many other things have gone right. I mean, she's, in all other respects, she's totally disabled, really. That's about the only thing she can do. So we try and make it as good as we can. We went, sorry, I was just going to say, we used to go abroad on holiday because we found aeroplanes were almost better than buses and cars and things, because they'd lift Mary into the seat and they looked after her very well. But recently our doctor, the specialist fellow, said, well, look, I really think you ought to cut out overseas holidays. I don't think it's doing you any good. So we don't go abroad anymore. We'll go abroad shortly because one of our daughters is going to live in France. But that's not like abroad. That's not flying. That's just trotting across the channel on the ferry. So we're going to do that.
Does the warm weather help, Mary? I find myself, if I go away to warmer climates, I don't like the heat here, but abroad, I feel so much better.
Yes, I'd say it does, actually. I don't actually, to be honest, I shouldn't be telling you this because you know better than me. I don't actually think it's the temperature that's doing it. I think it's when you go abroad, you've got nothing to think about. You can relax. You don't have to worry about the kitchen. You don't have to worry about the food. Nothing. And I think that's probably more than the temperature, because hot temperature you don't like it at all, as you were saying as you.
But if you go to a country that is hot, but it hasn't got the humidity, I find that makes a big difference.
Yeah, you're right, actually. But one of our daughters lives in Turkey, the other in France. The one who lives in Turkey, though, she's always said, no, don't come before September because it's just too hot in the middle of the summer. And, come before May if you're going to come early. And we did that a couple of times, three or four times we went across.
Well, we went to Cuba the other year and they'd just finished having the rainy season, but it was still very humid. You'd have a shower and unbelievably, you would just drip once you got out because it was just so muggy and hot, and my legs just didn't work.
No,
and I felt so guilty. My husband pushing me in this wheelchair. Obviously, it was hot for him too, and then pushing me as well. It was sort of doubly hot. I did feel terribly guilty, but my legs just wouldn't work. Sorry?
I wouldn't feel guilty. I'm sure he was quite happy to do it. He'd rather not, of course, but I'm sure he was happy to do it.
Well, let's say he didn't park me on the curb and leave me.
That's right. Yes.
We always have this argument where I say to him, no, I can do it. I can do it. I can walk. So he'll insist on taking the wheelchair. So I'll say, well, if you're going to take the wheelchair, get out of the way and let me push it, which, of course, actually holding on to it, it's like having a Zimmer frame. It does help.
No, that's right. We once went skating, ice skating, and the kids went skating, and then it was very few people on the ice, and the fellow in charge said, would you like to go on with a wheelchair? And I was, yeah, do you think you can? Yes, go on, he said. And we went on and my skating's not so good, so I was holding on to that, and I looked very professional, and Mary was able to go around and join in the fun with the kids. So it's great. So
isn't that lovely?
You've got to do these things.
The thing is, you have to learn to adapt and adjust.
That's right.
You know, if you can't do it one way, you can probably adapt it so you can still join in, but differently.
Oh yeah, no.
I can remember the first time of going in a wheelchair. I thought that if I went in a wheelchair, that MS was beating me, you know, and I was giving in. But then my daughter was 15 at the time, and my husband was taking her here, there, and everywhere, and I was staying at home or sitting in the car, especially if they were going out for walks.
Yeah.
And then it suddenly occurred to me I was excluding myself.
That's
I was
right.
becoming, my life was just in four walls. So by having a wheelchair, I could actually join in.
Yeah.
So that was a big eye opener. I mean, it's not very nice being in a wheelchair, especially when people aren't very well educated. They think just because your legs don't work that you're mentally impaired.
That's right.
Shout or talk to you as though you don't understand. And the good thing is, you know, the thing of talking to the person who's pushing, you know, is she all right? You know?
Oh, I know. Oh, that infuriates me.
It's horrible, isn't it? It
right.
really is horrible. I can remember we went to an open evening at my daughter's college, and I'd got the slip of paper which told me where to go. So obviously my husband was pushing me. I got to the reception desk first, and I asked where room such and such was. Yeah. And the look of horror on this young lady's face, you know, the cripple speaks. And I told her where we wanted to go. So she then completely blanked me. I didn't exist anymore once I'd asked. And she then addressed my husband. You go up here and go to these and da-da-da. Have you got that? So my husband said, wait a minute. And he walked round to the front of the wheelchair and he looked at me and he said, did you get that? And I said, yes, thank you.
Oh, I like that.
It just makes you feel so much better, doesn't it? You know.
Oh yeah, no,
and
that's right.
Another thing is how people, if you're going into a shop when they're not automatic doors, they'll see somebody coming with a wheelchair and just let the door close.
Oh, I've had that happen. But I don't know, maybe it's our little old place in Dorset. We found people very helpful, but maybe they've seen us around the town quite a lot now because we always go down for coffee 2 or 3 times a week, and. Yeah, maybe, but it's true. You do get people that go through and they'll just let the door close. You know,
yes, and then of course, if you're behind the wheelchair, you've got to have extra long arms to try and push the door and then push the wheelchair. Very difficult if people are inconsiderate. But then again, shops should be disabled friendly, and they should have some automated doors. Really.
Absolutely. Oh
so
yeah.
You're not excluded.
It's getting better, but.
Yes, I understand. I'm probably going to be seeing you, Brian.
Yes.
Tomorrow?
Not tomorrow night, next night. Next day. I'm going to the afternoon session.
Ah, right, okay. So that'll be interesting.
Yes, I'm interested. I'm supposed to have done something for Peter, but I'm afraid I haven't done it yet. I would have done, except Mary's gone into respite, and she couldn't go in the first couple of days because the lift failed.